Welcome everyone to our GritLink webinar, Learn How to Self-Assess Your Running to Prevent Injuries and Get Faster. For those folks who are not familiar with GritLink, a little bit about who we are. GritLink was founded last year in 2019, and GritLink helps the endurance and adventure community find healthcare providers who are experts in working with athletes. And our mission is to be the go-to resource for endurance athletes to find endurance, sports healthcare, and science-based content to align with active lifestyles and gritty mindsets. So a little bit about us. So now I'm excited to introduce to you our presenter for the webinar. Dzuka Lin is a physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach at Action Reaction Physical Therapy, which is located in the Lake City neighborhood in Seattle. Dzuka provides systemic and analytical exercise-based physical therapy for athletes of varying ages in sports, including running, which we're here to focus on tonight, rock and mountain climbing, and many other sports as well. Dzuka himself is also an avid participant in sports, including things such as ice hockey, soccer, basketball, running, climbing, hiking, and many more. So I will go ahead and I will turn it over to you, Dzuka.
Great. Thank you very much, Joan, for the wonderful intro. So today, we're going to be talking about learning how to self-assess your running to prevent injuries and get faster. The agenda will break down into three parts. The first part being the running phases. Specifically, there's the heel strike, mid stance, and the toe off, but we'll mostly focus on the heel strike portion and the mid stance portion. The second is the functional movement screens that, I definitely want all of you out there to not just be sitting around and reading this, but I actually want you to actually self-assess with some tests to see where your weaknesses may lie or where your strengths may lie as well. The third part is the exercises to run and move faster. We'll talk about let's talk about common running injuries. And up there is, with that 64%, looks like we've got the runner's knee, or also known as patellofemoral syndrome, which is basically, there's a tracking that the kneecap has to go through. And there's like a little groove that it goes through. If your mechanics are off, whether it's weak glute muscles or, insufficient use or just, poor mechanics, where it creates an internal stress in the knee, you can get this, your kneecap can kind of glide out of that groove, and you can get this issue called patellofemoral syndrome. Achilles tendonitis, oftentimes it's a pretty common injury, and you can get this from straining your calf muscles and putting undue stress on the Achilles for, if you're running hills, or if you're just getting into the running and you haven't trained sufficiently. It's a pretty common injury. Hamstring strain as well. Back of your thigh, if you are trying to suddenly do a burst of speed with a sudden force, you can strain that hamstring pretty easily. Plantar fasciitis, commonly an overuse issue in the bottom of your, that manifests itself in the bottom of your feet. Shin splints, you get some pains on the front of your tibia area, and once again, it can be actually kind of tied in with your overuse of calf muscles, or if you are trying to up your speed or your run and you're not quite conditioned, you can get shin splints. You can also get fractures from those if it gets bad enough in that shin area. Iliotibial band syndrome, also known as IT band syndrome, pain on the kind of the lateral outside part of that knee, which is also quite common. Often it can actually run with the patellofemoral syndrome and kind of be related to how well your kneecap tracks, and other stress fractures too. All right, so key muscles of the run. We've got your transversus abdominis muscles, or your pelvic floor muscles, which I'm going to put as number one because you need those muscles to create rotation. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that rotation creates speed and power and good trunk stability. So without a good trunk, then you're not going to have a good basis for your run. Gluteus medius actually kind of runs there with the transverse abdominis. It helps to align your hips and pelvis. It's the captain of the ship in some sense, that it helps to kind of steer where that hip and the knee are going. The gluteus maximus, they're like your thrusters, and they push you forward. They also keep you from falling backwards. And we'll talk about them pretty soon. The inner quad, or the VMO, vastus medialis obliquus, it's one of your 4 quad muscles. It's the, I like to see good bulk when I see people come in the clinic. I want to see this good VMO when I'm seeing people load into their knees. It's one of the 4 quad muscles that really helps you to put extra load into those knees when you're tackling, when you're going downhill, or when you're running up hills. All right, and it's just a little bit picture so you can kind of see where they are in relationship to your body when you're running. Let's talk about the running phases. You've got there's 3 components. We'll just break it down into the three components, but there's actually more to the run too. There's more phases actually, but the main ones we'll focus on are the heel strike and the mid stance. So for the next slide, the running phase, heel strike. Actually, so if you guys, I can't see you, but if you can stand up, and I want you to put your hands on your glutes. So actually, I'll show you. All right. So if you are, when you're striking with your heel, I'm going to adjust this so you can see me. So you can strike with when you make contact with the floor and you strike with your heel, I want you to put your hands on your butt muscles. Let's say that we'll strike with my left heel here. If you can feel, I want you to tell, kind of tell yourself, what do you feel? Do you feel your gluteus muscle work for you, your gluteus maximus muscle, your main thruster? And a lot of the times that'll be a no as soon as you make that contact. When you come onto that foot and you get into the mid stance of the run or the walk, then you should feel that gluteus maximus muscle work for you. If you do not, then log that in your head that maybe I need to learn to activate that gluteus maximus, or maybe I need to train those glute muscles to work faster and a little bit better, actually. Just work on some actual strength training for those gluteus maximus muscles. The next thing is the running phase mid stance. We'll do it from a frontal view, but specifically what I'm interested in when you go from a heel strike to mid stance is that. So anyway, we talked about the heel strike, and when you strike with your heel, I want that glute to work for you a little bit. As you come onto it, I want that gluteus maximus muscle to work at its most. And along with that mid stance, I also don't want to see a hip drop. It's pretty common, and I want you to, if you've got that mirror in front of you, try to see if that hip, knee, and foot are in good alignment. And if you put your hands on the top of your pelvic crest, I want to see if you should see if your pelvis drops on the opposite side. Try it on the other side as well. See if that pelvis is staying fairly level, or is it dropping? And I also want you to kind of feel if on that standing leg, if that gluteus maximus is working at its maximum, and also the gluteus medius, which is kind of this muscle where if you put your hands on the like a pants back pocket, at the opening of the pocket, generally you can feel that gluteus medius work for you. Try to feel if that muscle is engaged. And besides the hip drop too, I also want you to feel whether or not the pelvis is squaring up towards that standing leg. So oftentimes I'll see that people go through the heel strike, and then they go through the mid stance, and they'll either have this little hip drop, or the pelvis doesn't quite rotate fast enough towards that standing leg, and so they'll get like a little bit of a lag behind. That inefficiency between the hip drop or that little lag can create some problems, and we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, you can get patellofemoral syndrome. You can get little IT band syndromes. You can get all sorts of knee issues along with that little hip drop and that internal rotation of the hip as well. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is functional movement screening. So I was thinking that we would start with the good old-fashioned overhead squat, and so I'm going to show you what that looks like, and then I want you guys to try it out on your own. So basically, what we're going to do, I'll do it in a side profile view. You can look at yourself in the mirror, and what I want you to do is put your hands overhead, and I want you to squat down as far as you can. But the things I want you to think about are, try not to let your hands go past your toes, and try not to let your knees go past your toes, and see how far you can go. I'm kind of lucky because I'm flat-footed and in some way, and that allows me to, and I also have a pretty good hip hinging, and that allows me to get down there pretty well and get back up. Some of you are going to find that you don't quite get that, you get to a certain point and your arms are going to go forward, and you're going to have difficulty keeping those arms behind those toes. Oftentimes that's related to this upper back being a little bit restricted, and that it doesn't quite open up. And you'll kind of find that with your running too. You're running, and then all of a sudden you start to see that your shoulders are rounding, and your back doesn't quite want to stay upright, and then your head starts kind of go forward with it. Then you might want to work on, if you have that tightness and you can't quite get down there into that deep squat, you might want to work on a few things like stretching out your lats, working on getting that upper back to open up. And, you can go on a foam roller, and you can, work on just kind of stretching out your pecs along the way. But I will let you guys kind of figure that out. I also have some exercises on this program that I'll give you guys a code for that you can practice, working on some of these issues that you may have a restriction in.
Hey, Dzuka.
Yeah.
We had a question that came in, so I'll give it to you, and you can decide if it's a good time to answer this right now while you're doing these particular exercises, or if you want to wait. The question that we have in is it possible to have a gluteus that activates and the other one that doesn't?
Yes, you bet. If you're in the clinic, I would know. I would test it, and we would test the strength, and we would check. Also, I would check to see, does that? It may be strong, but it just doesn't activate when it should. And oftentimes, that glute muscle will, I'll check to see if the hamstring or the butt muscle fires up first. And oftentimes, that we'll find that the glute just kind of lags behind hamstring. But there is inequalities between your glutes. They're two separate areas, two separate sides of those glutes. So yeah, definitely there is we see a difference. And then you'll often find that with that difference, with that weaker side, or the side that doesn't, quite fire up when it should, you'll find that side might have some issues with running. A good question. Okay, so let's talk about that overhead squat again. If let's say that you can't keep those arms overhead, and you can squat down. I don't know if you can see me, but you can squat down, and it doesn't go past your knees. Your hips can't go past your knees. Oftentimes, then I'll have people kind of do a forward bend, and if they can't keep their back nice and flat and starts to round out, they don't know they got some hip hinging restrictions. The hamstrings are not are super tight, or calves are super tight, and they can't quite bend through those hips, and so that those hips are a little bit stiff. And so we might want to work on some hamstring stretches, or just some good old-fashioned forward bending, but trying to keep your knees somewhat straight, and learning to bend through those hips. Keep those hips nice and mobile is important for your run. Okay, the last thing. Let's say that actually, let me see if I can adjust accordingly. All right, so let's say that you get down to that squat, and then you get pretty deep, and all of a sudden your toes come off. So usually what that means is you've got tight calves. And there's two types of calf muscles: the gastroc muscle, which is the muscles involved when your knee is straight, and the soleus muscle when your knee is bent. So yeah, you can just kind of work on some good old-fashioned calf stretches. Back knee straight, good old-fashioned runner's stretch, or back knee slightly bent for the soleus muscle. But anyway, that's a kind of nice little test. It's that overhead squat. See where your where your restrictions are, and try to work with them. All right, the next thing is a single leg bridge. So I'm going to get my mat over here. Thanks for being patient with me, everyone.
As you get yourself set up, we did have another question that came in.
Sure.
Okay, so the question is, you mentioned FMS testing and squatting with heels off of the ground. Is this always due to tight calves, or could it just be a control issue?
Okay, so that it can be a control issue let's say you do have good mobility, but you may be tight and restricted in your ankle joint, actually, or you can also have just a general lack of stabilization that's going to kind of through your glutes or other muscles, so that it's going to kind of, the only place that you can go is kind of on your toes. But it can be like a restriction in your actual ankle joint, or it could be a balance issue, or it also could be insufficient strength through other stabilizers like your abdominals or your glute muscles. Yeah, so it can be some of these other issues. Yes.
And there's one other question, and then we'll let you move on. So the question is, I was feeling my back muscles, the ones along the side of my lower and mid spine, engage heavily during the squat when keeping my hands up. Is this an issue?
Yeah, so I would say that if you are feeling it around this paraspinal area, or if if you have a tendency to kind of overextend your lumbar or thoracic area, you may actually be compensating with that, with that squat by using your back too much, actually, which is pretty common. What I usually say is, try to engage your abdominal muscles to try to keep that that lumbar thoracic area neutral. And when you come on down, you're going to have to maybe engage a little bit more, or you may actually do like a little pelvic tilt slightly just to keep that back kind of neutral, if that bothers you. Some people, do have hyperextension through their lumbar thoracic areas, and they have to watch that.
Thank you. That was the last question we had.
Sure.
For now.
Okay. Yeah, those people that are a little bit hypermobile in those areas, they just want to work on good trunk stability during that time. Okay, so single leg bridge. Let's check for that gluteus maximus and core strength. So if you guys want to just go lie down on your floor, I'm going to bring this over here. Okay. So basically, if you put your hand in front of you and you tighten actually don't tighten anything just yet. Just keep your hands in front of you and kind of lift your pelvis off the ground just a little bit. And if you're to kick one leg straight, I want you to hold it there for about 10 seconds. And try to keep your pelvis nice and level and feel what's happening. Does your hamstring cramp up on your stance leg? Does your pelvis stay bare? Are you shaking? Are you are you having difficulty not keeping it nice and level, or is it kind of veering off to the side? Try the other side. Same thing, bridge first, and then kick off your other leg. See if your pelvis stays nice and level. Does your hamstring cramp, which is very common? The hamstrings often beat the glutes to the punch. And 10 seconds, see if you can keep that, and then come on back down. If you feel that you're, I'll try to get back here. If you feel that you're, if your hamstrings didn't cramp up, if your pelvis stayed fairly level, then yeah, that's a pass for the 10 seconds. If you failed, like either your hamstrings cramped up, or that's an indication that your hamstrings are dominating your glutes and your trunk, and you want those glutes and trunk muscles to do their job. You want those muscles to kind of take over first. But the hamstrings oftentimes are, kind of beat the glutes to the punch, and you just have to train yourself to engage those glute muscles. When you make contact with your heel, and upon heel strike to mid stance, you just want to get those glutes to fire up before the hamstrings have a chance to take over. So glutes and hamstrings should fire up about the same time, or the glutes should fire up before the hamstrings. And that's kind of a little, that's a little test to see how much do those hamstrings kind of overcompensate. The other part is, let's say that your hamstrings don't cramp up, but your pelvis kind of dropped down, and you're just having difficulty trying to keep the pelvic bones nice and level. Oftentimes, yeah, that's just, you need to work on some trunk strength, some lower abdominals, specifically transversus abdominis muscles, and maybe some pelvic muscles as well associated with those abdominals. Anyway, the next one is a little step-up test. And
I had one question, sorry, Dzuka, for interrupting. The question that came in relevant to what you were just talking about, how do you get your glutes to activate before your hamstrings?
That's a great question. That takes practice. But one thing that you can practice, let's say that this single leg bridge is a little bit too much. Every time that you do it, despite you putting all your firepower into your glute muscles, that you still keep on cramping up. You can do it, and you can strengthen those glutes in different positions. You could do it on your stomach, where you put a pillow underneath your stomach and you engage your abdominals and glutes first, and then you just kind of work on a low leg lift. You could do it over an exercise ball as well, and you practice engaging the butt muscles first, and then you can lift up the leg, and then you can work on a pure extension, or you can also put it like a little abduction. You can kind of lift it up and kick it to the side if you want to get a little bit of that gluteus medius with it. But in answer to your question, engage those butt muscles first, and see if you can practice that like when you're walking, as well. Just trying to, as soon as you make contact with your heel, try to get that glute muscle to just slightly engage if it doesn't quite engage when you're walking. In terms of a single leg bridge test, you can make that an exercise too. If you can actually get that glute muscle and put all your work into that gluteus to the point that you don't allow that hamstring to kind of take over, then do that. I usually say, after, if they cramp up, that you engage your glute, and then you try to see, and then I tell them, like, put the whole kitchen sink into it and engage your abdominals with that. And if they want a little bit of help, you can also raise your ankle up so the toes are off. That way you're kind of pushing through your heel, and that sometimes also may get that glute to take over for the hamstring.
Thank you.
Sure. But a lot of training. You can't think about it when you're running, though. You got to train, try to get that muscle to work ahead of time, and then you can incorporate it into your running. So a step-up test. First, just practice. If you have a step in front of you, great. If you don't, you don't even need a step. But this is just to you can just practice stepping forward and balancing on one leg, and for about 5 seconds, and then coming on back. Try to look at yourself in the mirror if you do have one, and see if, first of all, when you make contact with your foot, can you get your butt muscle to slightly activate? Second of all, when you come up, does your pelvis kind of go along with that step, or does it kind of lag behind? If you step up and this side is kind of lagging behind, make note of it. Try to get your glute muscle on the stance leg to push that opposite pelvis forward. So get that glute muscle to fire up initially when you make that first contact, and get that glute muscle to push the opposite pelvis forward and try to hold it there. I don't know if you can see my trunk. A lot of people will do this. When they make contact, they're going to kind of lean forward. This pelvis will kind of lag behind, and then they'll kind of scoop up. I want a more direct approach. I want you to engage that glute muscle, get that butt muscle to kind of push that opposite pelvis forward, and try to keep that nice upright posture. So, a little, we try to see if you have any of these, compensations where you're just not getting that pelvis forward enough. That's kind of where that single leg bridge exercise, or, actually the next test is a single leg squat exercise, but you can also you can work on the single leg bridge, and you can do a little single leg squat, and you can also work on just stepping up and learning to engage that glute muscle to fire it up a little bit faster. So that kind of answers a little bit of that other question, which is how do you get that glute to fire up? You can work on step ups, and you can practice making good contact. You're making contact and getting that glute to fire up immediately, and then try to get that opposite pelvis to swing up with it faster. Single leg squat. Yeah, so, okay, so for a single leg squat, if you were to stand on the one leg, try to keep, actually I won't say anything, you're just gonna practice doing like a quarter squat. You're gonna try to stick I'll try to balance and not look, but you're gonna basically do a quarter squat, hold it there about 5 seconds, come on back up. try to do this by not letting your knee go past your toe. You can also do it with your hands. You can't quite see it, but you can do it with your hands kind of overhead like you did the whole leg squat. And see if you can try to keep that nice and stable and neutral. And come on back up. Now, if you're doing it in front of the mirror, if you just look down, see if you do this. If you're coming down, does the knee kind of cross the midline? Does your hip internally rotate? Does your opposite pelvis rotate with that too? Does your trunk want to lean forward? Are you doing a lot more work through your trunk? If you have a tendency to cross the midline or internally rotate or rotate away, try tightening your butt muscle first again. So there's kind of a little theme here. Try to get that glute to work for you and see if that gluteus medius, this kind of side butt muscle, activates and kind of rights the ship. And then see if you can come on down and try to keep that engaged the whole time. And see if that kind of keeps that hip, knee, and foot in good alignment, keeps that pelvis in good alignment. And also, then try to see if you can, if you tend to round forward, try to use your abdominals to kind of keep those abs in check and to keep that trunk nice and upright. So, little bit of a test to see. It's a nice little test specifically for the gluteus medius. If the hip and the leg kind of turns in, try to get in tune with that gluteus medius. Once you get the muscle that is close to around that top of the pants pocket area. And one thing that I want to kind of emphasize is good core strength is pretty important for runners. The transversus abdominis and a bunch of these pelvic floor muscles, their job is to create control. They actually control speed and they control power. Their job is to create like a rotational inertia. The legs, the hands, and the knees and the legs around that area are just like little pistons that are creating that kind of creating that drive, that create that rotation. So rotation this way is good. You want rotation. That when I see people that are walking and they tend to kind of walk and they're really stiff in their arms, I just tell them, okay, you need to let your arms swing naturally. You need to kind of create, sometimes create a little bit more rotation this way. But oftentimes too, they'll have like a little hip drop, and that's not what you want. That's inefficient. So if you see like like someone's stepped here and they kind of sashay, don't make me do that again, but if you see them sashay, then you might think, okay, either they're a supermodel or they have weak gluteus medius muscles. But I think that you're going to want to, if you're a runner, you want to work on that efficiency. If you have any hip drop, that's inefficient. That's more work for you. And that's the kind of the common theme between all runners. If you're a sprinter, it has the quick twitch muscle fibers, instant burst of energy, or the long distance runners, including ultra marathon runners. The common theme is that their pelvis, their pelvis is just kind of gliding along. There's different levels of heights with it, depending on your, what you're trying to accomplish with the run, but your pelvis is always kind of gliding at a smooth level, and that's efficient. So kind of think about that when next time that you're going for a run, see if you kind of keep that pelvis nice and level. But yeah, do use your arms, do use your legs, try to create rotation, side, around this axis, but don't let that hip drop occur on either side. Oh yeah, and then so there's some other just little tips on running as well. I like a little bit of a forward lean, kind of like the Maasai tribe in Africa. They've got like a little bit of a forward lean. The trunk is still kind of fairly neutral, but that's a little more efficient because if you put a backward lean to it, then your glutes don't quite and you aren't quite using these guys, sometimes you're going to kind of create like a negative force. You're almost kind of you're kind of fighting against your own self. And you got a little bit of a forward lean with that run. Then your chances of hitting that midfoot to forefoot are a lot better, and it has less of that kind of a negative impact. There's different runners out there, whether it's if you're more of a barefoot runner, then the tendency to kind of be more on your mid to forefoot is even stronger. So you're going to need a little bit of that forward lean with that run. Let's see. For a mid stance, like I was saying, pelvic rotation is good. Also, keeping the hips is nice and level is also good. If you can watch, if you have any of these pains, actually, I'm just going to go over injuries with you. If you have any of these, like patellofemoral syndrome, which is pretty common, you're going to find that when you strike with your heel, that what happens is that a lot of times there's the internal rotation of that hip, either because of faulty mechanics, or some people just have like a little knock-kneedness, or overuse of IT bands. But oftentimes with IT band syndrome and patellofemoral syndrome, this hip kind of rotates in, and the kneecap laterally goes out. This kneecap generally has to go in and down and in and up when you're bending and extending your knee. But if it doesn't quite do that, and it kind of turns in, then you're going to have this kind of nice little lateral pain from IT band syndrome, or you'll have pain around that kneecap area. And you can avoid that by kind of getting in tune with using those glute muscles and trying to get that hip, knee, and foot in good alignment. If the hip is more rotated out and the opposite pelvis is kind of pushing forward, then you have a better likelihood of getting that kneecap to track correctly. Less stress on the IT band, more use of your inner quad, that VMO muscle. So yeah, that's something I often see, and I try to correct immediately. So over here, I mean, we've got the this is just an overview of specific muscles, and you've got to get your gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and your inner quads working together. They kind of all work in this nice perfect chain in the perfect world. So generally, and it's all kind of tied together. So when you engage your abdominals, and you got your gluteus maximus muscles that helps to stabilize your trunk, and you got your gluteus medius muscles to right the ship, and then you got the inner quad muscles working with the gluteus muscles, that helps to kind of keep that hip, knee, and foot in good alignment. Yeah, and then this is kind of like, that deep overhead squat that we were talking about at first. If your back kind of tends to round forward, or you can't quite get your hands behind you, you may need to work on either shoulder mobility or upper back mobility, just to get that range of motion. I wish I could tell you, I can't see you all, but these are just some general ideas, and then you can kind of look up some of these exercises on your own. If you cannot squat low enough, hips with hips past your knees, before you can't go any further, then you might want to work on your hip hinging, your ability to kind of bend through the waist without your back rounding. Try stretching your hamstrings if they're tight, or work on just bending through, try to like pretend like you're in front of the Japanese emperor and you're doing a nice formal bow without rounding your back. If your heels come off at the end of your squat, you may have tight calves, or you may have hypomobile, ankle joints. And so you can try stretching your calves. If they don't quite, do that, and you tend to have some pain around the Achilles, or pain around your ankle area, you might want to work on some maybe have a manipulation or kind of have someone work into those ankle joints so that they can move better. All right. And single leg bridge, just like in this, like we talked about. You're going to try to see if the hamstrings cramp up. You're going to try to see if the pelvis stays nice and stable. If you failed any of these guys during that 10-second hold, try to see if you can engage those glute muscles over the hamstrings in order to not cramp up. If you can't quite keep your pelvis nice and level, work on both your glutes and your abs to try to work on that trunk stability. Step ups. Practice. Do this as kind of assessment for your single leg balance, or actually for your mid stance. Sorry, you're going to try to you're going to step up, see if your hip internally rotates or if your knee turns in. See if your opposite hip drops. See if your trunk or head kind of translates forward, or you kind of stoop forward. And if you get any of these guys, try to correct it. Try to get your glute muscle to fire up as soon as you make contact, and fire it up a little bit more as you step up. Bring your opposite pelvis forward and keep nice and upright during this whole process. This all works as all these parts have to work together in order to functionally run well. All right. And then in terms of the single leg squat, see, this is a good assessment of your gluteus medius muscles. Normally you come to clinic and I would have people lie on their side and I test their strength and sideline with their hip, lifting out to the side. But because of these crazy times, some of you don't want to come on in. So you can kind of do this little test on your own, and you can practice just doing a single leg squats, same kind of thing with step ups. Does your pelvis kind of stay squared away, or do you kind of rotate away from that stance leg? Does your knee kind of cross the midline? Does your opposite hip drop away along with that rotation away? If you have any of these, then you're probably going to want to work on those gluteus medius muscles. And that may mean, either doing these little side leg lifts on your side, lying on your side, or in standing. Or, you can practice like lateral step ups sometimes too, by trying to keep the pelvis nice and level. There's all sorts of exercises, but what I want to kind of throw to you is, I'll have this on an exercise app, and you guys can just, put in the code if you download the app on your phone, and you can have some of these exercises to strengthen these weaknesses on your own. All right. Same kind of thing. Just, engage strengthen those abdominals, strengthen your gluteus medius, kind of as usually that's kind of they kind of run hand in hand as being the primary areas of weaknesses. Strengthen those gluteus maximus muscles, because they are the biggest muscles of your body, pound for pound, and then get those inner quad muscles working. But generally, if you kind of train all these together, those VMO muscles should kick in with those glutes. Like I said before, get those abs working. And this is just kind of shows, the efficient runner. If you get a little hip drop, you're going to see a lot of these issues with running, such as patellofemoral syndrome, IT band syndrome, and this also leads to further down the chain to Achilles issues and shin splints. And once again, just these the muscle groups in relation to what it looks like when you're running. I would say, like, if you have any, if you like to have these for your own notes, you're welcome to drop an email to, I guess maybe I'll talk to Joan about it, but you're welcome to email me and I can kind of send you some of these notes too. And this is the exercise app I was talking about. We use a thing called MedBridge. And it's if you just get MedBridge Go on your phone, you could just enter this code, and I put a few exercises that you can kind of practice should you have any of these weaknesses that you experienced today. The other thing I want to throw in there is that it's hard to, it's hard to see what, if someone says I've got pain here and there and it's, associated with running, it's hard for me to actually tell them, okay, this is what you need to do. I actually kind of have to just see it, see how people run. So I'm throwing out there that if you want to, you can, take a video of yourself or have someone take a video of you. Preferably from the back view or the side profile view. I like to, if you're wearing shorts, so I can see the hip, knee, and foot. And I also like to see if you can kind of have a little bit of the back exposed so that I can see that both the back, hip, knee, and foot, and see if there's like a hip drop, internal rotation of your hip. See if your glutes don't look like they're firing fast enough. And I can give you a little bit of feedback. If you want to send an email my way. And then next, and thank you for your time. Thanks for letting me into your virtual home. And I appreciate you guys logging in.
Yeah, is there anybody else that has any questions for Dzuka? You can go ahead and type it in the Q&A. Yeah, so are there any outliers that may have people's hamstrings fire before their glutes and this may not cause any issues?
Yeah, some people, just have short, just short hamstrings and short glutes, those hamstrings may fire up and just be tight in general, and they may fire up before those glutes. But as long as the form is still there, and as long as they, can engage those glute muscles to kind of match the hamstrings. There's other outliers too. There's IT band, and there's also, we didn't talk about like especially for women, the tendency to hyperextend those knees, and sometimes that can kind of shut off those glutes, and we then have to kind of train to try to keep that knee from hyperextending. But yeah, there's a whole myriad of outliers. Also, really short calf muscles can also supersede those glutes too. But the main thing I want to just say is that if you can keep good form and you can and you can get these muscles to fire up when they are supposed to fire up, then chances are that you'll be okay.
Let's see. Oh, shoe question. As we identify weaknesses, are there specific types of shoes we should use to help us correct our movement, like a specific shoe type for each weakness?
Yes. That's a great question. So I've been doing injury screenings at Super Jock Jill, first Tuesday of every month for 15 years there. And, and I leave it up to those guys there, even though you can't physically go in the store. But there are specific, let's say that you've got all the components down, you got everything firing up well, but you have like an overpronated foot, or you have really flat feet, or you have like, loose ankle joints. Yeah, there is a specific shoe for everyone. And that's kind of where, I kind of approach it from like a top down level. I like to make sure that all the muscles and all the, the joints and everything are working in good synchronicity. But sometimes from the bottom up, you need that, if that's your first point of contact and your foot doesn't quite get that support it needs, then yeah, you've got like a pronation control shoes, you've got a neutral shoe, you've got like, well, let's say, you have bad back and you're compressing your discs. Sometimes, you want something with a little more cushion, like a Hoka. There's a shoe for every occasion. So yeah, there's definitely a good need for good shoes. And yeah, you want to train, if you're training a pretty good amount, if you're a super runner, you may need to change out your shoes every 3 months, you know, if a moderate runner, maybe every 6 months. You know, so yeah, try to, you know, that's a question that you may want to just phone into, you know, these good running shoe stores and ask them, you know, like, I've got this specific issue. Is there something that you would recommend? You know, they've got a great return policy too. It's usually, you know, if it doesn't quite work out for you, you can always send it back to them in general, and it works out pretty well. So good question though.
So we are at time. There's 2 questions we didn't get to, so my apologies on that. Up on the screen, you should be seeing contact info. So Dzuka's information is all over there, so you can see that. He's also a provider in the GritLink provider network. So you can, if you haven't already, create an account on gritlink.net. You can see our website over here. It's free, no charge to you, and we have our provider network, so providers such as Dzuka, who are experts in working with endurance athletes, so not only PTs, but we have sports chiropractors and nutrition, dietitian, strength and conditioning coaches, massage therapists. So definitely check that out if you haven't already been in there, but here is his information here as well. And again, I want to thank Dzuka for going through all this wonderful information to help us. So thank you again, everybody, for attending, and our information is here, so you can contact us with your questions if you have them. So, and again, thank you, Dzuka.
Thank you.